And hello, everybody. I'm Chad Eaves here with my co-host Michael Gansl and our guest Sam Liebowitz. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live event. This is going to be something we're going to look at doing moving forward. We hope that you enjoy the experience. And this is our first episode here for February. And hope everybody's having a good 2024. You're doing well and prosperous this year. Michael, share with the audience some information about Sam.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and good morning, Sam, Chad. So I have the pleasure today of introducing Sam Liebowitz. Now, I met Sam a few months ago, and I only knew him for his host of TalkRadio.NYC. And then as I got to know him, I realized there was so much more to learn about him, and I thought our audience would enjoy hearing more about him as well. So Sam is popularly known as the Conscious Consultant and is a successful entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, I would say, with more than 30 years of business experience, having owned and operated several companies and making him a sought-after authority. I can tell you that because I was in a meeting with him earlier today, and he gave me a lot of good advice about how to improve our show, which I'm grateful for. But he is a dynamic facilitator, a mentor, speaker, and healer, and the author of 2 best-selling books, including Everyday Awakening, You Are More Powerful Than You Know, which is an empowerment bestseller that has inspired and changed the lives of countless people. Now, he's got several current ventures. One is the Double Diamond Wellness, which is a healing center in Manhattan. And secondly, the Conscious Consultant, which is a coaching and mentoring service which promotes sensible, ethical, moral, and conscious ways to build careers and businesses. And he also serves as the host of the Conscious Consultant Hour, which is a popular radio program where he discusses personal growth, mindfulness, and spirituality. But he's not finished because he also owns TalkRadio.NYC, and I think you can see that underneath his banner. And TalkRadio.NYC is a broadcast quality internet radio station whose mission is to empower, uplift, and educate his audience. In business since 2010, the show has over almost 50 shows with 300,000 listeners in over 120 countries from around the world, which is quite impressive, Sam. The shows are by professionals for professionals and touch upon all areas of life. Each of the hosts who have their own show are experts in their field, and their topics range from leadership, personal and spiritual development, entrepreneurship, nonprofits, and many other topics that are relevant to a worldwide audience. 300,000 listeners in 120 countries is quite impressive. So in his various roles, obviously, Sam has inspired hundreds of people to live a life that's happier, healthier, and more fulfilling. So Sam, with everything that you're doing, I know Chad's probably going to ask you the first question.
Yeah. So I guess, we're going to, mainly talk about business and aspects of communication and wherever this takes us during our time together. What inspired you, or how did you get into working in the different, I guess, ways of connecting with people? So you're talking about coaching, broadcast, across that spectrum. What was the path that got you into this, what you're doing today?
Well, it was a very twisty, turny path with a lot of unexpected occurrences. And I would say my superpower is I just kind of say yes to life, what life puts in front of me. People ask me all the time, oh, how did you start the internet radio station? Do you have a background in broadcast? And I was like, nope, I met a guy at a party. And actually it totally changed my life. I had been doing real estate before. I was doing commercial leasing. And of course, I had a small development project and I got killed in 2008 like everybody else did and lost my shirt, so to speak. And I was at a party down in Chelsea, and a mutual friend kind of brings this guy to the party and says, Sam, you got to talk to my friend. I'm like, yeah, okay. So what do you ask somebody you know absolutely nothing about? So what do you do? And he's like, oh, I'm an acupuncturist. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I know a lot of healers, but not too many acupuncturists. But in his next breath, he was like, but I've decided to become a Buddhist monk and I'm selling off all my worldly possessions. I'm like, oh, that's a little different. I'm like, well, have you sold your business yet? And he goes, no, not yet, but I'm talking to some people. So I was like, well, I network a lot. I know a lot of people. Maybe I can help you sell your business. He's like, oh, that'd be really good karma for you. And so we're talking a little bit more. And then he says, oh, yeah. And I started this internet radio station last year. I'm like, wait a minute. This sounds a little familiar. Acupuncturist radio station. I'm like, what's your name again? And he says, Giorgio Rapetti. And I'm like, I know who you are because my friend Larry Sharp does a radio show on your network. And he's told me about you, but he's never put the two of us together. So now there he is standing in front of me in living color. A week later, we get together in his office, have this long 2.5-hour meeting. He's telling me all about his acupuncture practice, and he studied under this grandmaster in Hong Kong and all this stuff. And then he started talking about the radio station. And that really got my attention because I have a background in technology and I also have a background in public speaking. So it was a nice nexus. So I kind of jokingly said to him by the end of the meeting, I'm like, wow, this is such a good deal. It's like getting two businesses for the price of one. I'm like, if I can't help you sell your business, I'll just buy it myself. We both kind of laugh at that because I'm not an acupuncturist. I don't know anything about acupuncture. So I go home that night and I talk to my wife, who's a psychotherapist, and I tell her the whole story. And she looks at me, no expression on her face at all. And she's like, forget helping him to sell his business. And I'm like, really? And it was kind of crestfallen. I mean, he's a nice guy. I could earn some good karma, And then she's like, yeah, we may not have much money after the real estate debacle, but we may as well put what little bit we have into a business that's actually making money. Let's just buy it ourselves. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what a great idea. Yeah, let's do that. And so we brought in an acupuncturist for him to train who took care of his clients. And I knew a lot of other practitioners. So we made his acupuncture practice into a more generalized wellness center. My wife being a psychotherapist eventually started her private practice out of it. I was doing my coaching work out of it. And then I really focused on the radio station. I've redone the website several times since then, brought on lots of different hosts, tweaked the business model, and I really enjoyed it. And this is the longest I've ever done anything. I've had lots of different businesses. I usually last somewhere between 3 and 5 years before I get bored, and I'm just like, then this doesn't hold anything for me. But I've been doing this over 13 years, so this is definitely a special business to my.
Very cool. Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah. So how did you get into the wellness side of the business?
So the wellness side is kind of interesting. I mean, part of it is, and sort of the conscious consultant, that end of things sort of predates the wellness center and the radio station. But after I got married, I started to get back into personal development, which I had learned or read all the books and gone to the seminars back a long time ago when I was in college. Had gotten very far away from it. And I started going to like this group called the New York Power Team that I met somebody from it at one of the seminars. And they were like, hey, we get together once a month and remind each other of all the things we learn in the seminars. And so they'd go and they'd have presenters. And usually these people would present some kind of healing modality. And then they're promoting a workshop that they do on the weekend. So I'd go to the meetings. I'd get all excited about it. I'd come home, tell my wife, I'm like, oh, they're doing this workshop this weekend. Do you want to come? She said, sure. And so I was going to these workshops, though, not because I ever thought of myself as a healer, not because I ever thought I'd provide a service to people using it, for my own healing, because I'd been through some traumatic stuff early in life. And I was really just looking to feel better. So I learned one modality after another, and I really got into it. I eventually became a Reiki master practitioner. I learned theta healing, magnified healing, celestial light healing, like all these different healing modalities. And then there was that one workshop where they teach you the modality, and then they pair you up with people. And I helped this woman release a condition that she'd had since she was 6 years old. And I was like, oh, and then kind of the light bulb went off, and it's like, like this stuff isn't just for me to help myself. Like I could actually use this to help other people with it. But I was like, but I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business guy. What do you do with this? Right? I mean, this is like a whole nother world. And so I was sitting down, just kind of not really meditating, but just kind of sitting with it. And then the kind of thing came up was like, well, you're still kind of a business consultant. You're just a different kind of consultant. And that's where this whole idea of the conscious consultant was born. And then I started just doing some sessions for free for some friends, got some testimonials, and then just started building a business out of it.
I think that's an interesting comment you made about the roles of entrepreneur versus what a person does. Because I've had my own first business since 2003. And I've always found it interesting when someone says, I'm an entrepreneur, but it's more, at least from my perspective, it describes how you do something. It's like you're doing the consulting, the healing, and it's almost like more of like how you're delivering it, versus like corporate environment or entrepreneurial or something like that. And I always find that an interesting comment when people address it in that way. Now, when you work with people, in your consulting and coaching roles, what do you do when you hear that from people that you're working with? Because, you can't swing a stick like networking events or conferences, like I'm an entrepreneur, I want to do this. Well, what do you do? And then sometimes you get that 1,000-yard stare or like, what's hot right now or something like that.
Right.
Like, how do you respond or guide someone when you encounter them in that situation?
So, yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur is really a mindset. Entrepreneurs love to create things. They love to create new businesses. They love to find new solutions to the ways of doing things. And what they're actually doing is almost secondary. I mean, it's not, because real entrepreneurs are usually passionate about what they do. But if someone's like doing a business just to make money and all they want to do is like, I just want to make $1 million doing this, that's not a real entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is like on a mission to change the world or to serve a group of people that like to be the best at something or to just do something that no one else is doing. And that comes from the heart. And I think that's the difference, is that when you're working in the corporate environment, most of the time you're just up in your head. You're figuring things out. You got budgets, you got all this stuff. It's a very mental kind of thing. But being an entrepreneur is something that's in your heart. And I'm a big believer that, the mind should be the heart's soldier. It's like the heart tells us where to go and the mind should figure it out, not the other way around. But in this society, we so glorify the mind, and it's like everything is about the mind and how intellectual and how smart you are, that we forget there's this whole vehicle below our neck called our body that houses our heart. And the body itself has an incredible intelligence to it. So, being an entrepreneur, it's really about bringing your whole being into doing something and not just being stuck up in your head.
Well said. Well said. As you were talking, I was reliving my own experiences being an entrepreneur and thinking about what motivated me and what continues to motivate me all these years. I basically want to break down barriers, and I want to always do things that are different, and that's really what made me want to become an entrepreneur. I also wanted to be able never to see the end of the horizon.
Nice.
So, and that's what led me to do that, and it's been a fantastic journey. So let's move off a little bit. We've gotten to understand very much what has inspired and motivated you, and some of the challenges. So, let's talk a little bit more about TalkRadio.NYC. How have you managed to get 300,000 listeners? That's a big number.
It is. Well, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, I've been doing it over 13 years, almost 14 years. And I'm always learning and growing in that time, and it took a number of years to be able to get up to that number. but it was always looking for ways of how do I get the word out there? And again, we're a small business. I didn't have much money coming into this because we lost all my money in the financial crisis of 2008. So it's not like I had big budgets to advertise. So I always had to kind of take the guerrilla tactic approach. And so it's about finding all the different places online I could get the station listed as an internet radio station by bringing on good hosts who would help to spread the word and get it out there. Like we had on the number one nonprofit podcast, Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. He was the first host I brought on after I took over the station, and we worked together. He followed all my advice and he became the number one nonprofit podcast. So that helped to elevate us. All kinds of things. And now, of course, being virtual, like we always used to do things in studio, and all my hosts were kind of local to the New York City area. That's how we're TalkRadio.NYC. But when the pandemic hit, you couldn't social distance in a small room in a studio. So then we went virtual like everyone else. And now we've had hosts from around the globe. I've had shows from London, England, Mumbai, India, Sydney, Australia, all across the US. People say, Sam, but you're TalkRadio.NYC. Doesn't that bother you? People from other places? I'm like, no, I'm a native New Yorker, like Michael. It's like, we all know New York is the center of the universe. So it's okay that people from everywhere, because you can find everything in New York City, and anywhere you go, there's a connection from New York City to just about everywhere.
That's a great. That's funny.
That's such a, I mean, there's always the talk. Oh yeah, global.
Hold on, are you taking an insult from that chat? It says that NYC, the center of the world. You live in Chicago. I mean, that doesn't bother you?
No, because there's good and there's good and there's bad. I mean, that's what I was just going to say. Is it's really a model that gets replicated more places now. Like it was once upon a time. You had to be like in New York or in Chicago or in LA or whatever it was, depending on what you were doing. Like insurance, Chicago is a huge city for insurance. Yeah. NYC, obviously you got a lot of different things going on. Entertainment, LA. That's not so much the case anymore. I mean, there's been this dilution, but I do believe you still have the value of hubs at the same time. While you can have these satellite, entities and operations, there's still a value to knowing where to go to meet people and work with people and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of a hybrid, now where you got the best of both worlds, where we can access people and work with people, and it's not as geographically limited, as it used to be. I kind of got a big kick out of when the pandemic started, in the sense that since I started my first business in 2003, I've basically been either at a client site or working at my house. And then all of a sudden it was like 2020, we all got to work remotely. I'm like, come on, jump in. It's not that bad. It takes some change in your mindset and a lot of discipline and stuff like that. But, and
that's the thing I really noticed at the beginning of the pandemic, because I know a lot of people who their whole business was in person. They were like, they were speaking events, and for me, I literally changed our whole business over a weekend to be virtual. I'd always resisted it, but it was like, okay, this is the new reality. What do I have to do? And over a weekend, we went, figured out all the technology, how to stream from home virtually, how to record, how to get the music in there, how to make it so that the hosts can hear everything, the guests can hear everything, it gets recorded, gets streamed out live, because I didn't resist what is. Mm-hmm. But the people I saw who had the hardest time with the pandemic is they kept resisting what is. And they were like, oh, no, this is only going to last a couple of weeks. Oh, no, I can't change my business from an in-person business to a virtual business. But it's when you recognize the reality and you allow yourself to adapt to what's going on, that's when you learn to thrive. And the people who thrived the most during the pandemic were the people who just adapted and changed with what the new environment was.
Oh, for sure. And it's actually, another microcosm or example of, the evolution, revolution, adapt, approach. We see it now with AI, like as far as with what you're doing, Sam, where do you see advantages or areas of concern with the advance of AI with what you do?
So the advantages, I mean, I love AI. I've been learning all about the tools since, last year. It's great for helping with things like summaries, better transcriptions, pulling out clips from the shows that are good clips. I mean, still, you got to tweak it. You always got to pay attention to it. My concern around AI is this idea of it being able to copy our voices and our images. It's the deep fakes. That kind of stuff really bothers me, because then somebody can take your likeness, your voice, make you say whatever they want you to say and put it out as something. And that really bothers me. And that's something that I think we've really got to consider how we're going to deal with it. And this is one of those sort of important conversations that I feel is not happening often enough, is the ethics. And just because we can do something, should we be doing it? Now, look, I love technology. I'm a child of the Star Trek generation. I'm into all kinds of high tech stuff. But still, we've got to do things mindfully. And just because something can happen doesn't mean we should be doing it. What kind of safeguards should we put in place? And I just feel there's not enough conversation around that. I'm not saying I have the answers. I certainly don't. But I would love to foster more of those conversations.
Well, I think what you said with those conversations is key, because I'm moderating a panel on AI at Northwestern University next month.
Oh.
And all those topics are on the agenda. And we're actually having a guest that we had as a previous show, who Michael brought, introduced us to, Dr. Lipkowski. And it's all those topics. And it's like, it's not going to stop.
Right.
We're going to have to figure out a way to work with it. And it's all those considerations for sure.
Right. And especially, like, if other people are adapting these technologies, we need to learn to adapt them, but that doesn't mean we have to use them the same ways. And maybe we use some of these technologies to combat the way other people are using it if we feel they're using it in an inappropriate way. But that doesn't mean we should just ignore it. It doesn't mean we just stop. But it's, how do we move forward? I think sometimes we forget that asking the right question is sometimes the most important thing we can do. Because when we ask the right question, then we move in a good direction.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because our last guest was Dr. Brian Lipkowski, who actually is pursuing the answers to those questions. See, the questions seem to be only half great questions, but they require great answers. And so it's just interesting. We could take that offline. It'll be fun to have that conversation. Might introduce you to Brian, and you guys can talk about questions versus the answers. But and the key here is using AI to develop better answers. In other words, it's to amplify, not necessarily to replace, but to amplify. And I guess, yes, you have the ethical issue about AI, but the way it would seem to me to use AI today is to find a way to amplify what your own questions and your own answers.
And AI is a perfect example of, you've got to ask really good questions to get good answers out of the AI. I mean, this whole idea of prompt engineering is such an important thing. And I've been learning it myself, that the better you finesse how you ask your question of the AI can give you very different results, and can give you much better results when you learn how to ask it the question in the right way.
It's true. Oh, well, I might reverse it, and we can move on. But I would reverse it, and I might ask AI. I might say, "Give me the answer." But that's anyway. Let's move on. I could play with that. So I was going to ask you, what continues to inspire and motivate you?
To me, it's when I see people doing great work. When I see people coming from a real heart-centered place, where they're thinking about more than just themselves and they're on a mission to do something. Right now, one of my big concerns is the environment and what's happening, and I would say the lack of response to what's happening with the environment. And when I see people who are coming up with regenerative ideas, alternative energy sources, and all these potential solutions to help minimize our impact on the environment, that really inspires me. Young people inspire me who are so open and so willing to change and want to do things differently. That kind of spirit really helps me to feel better about the future.
That's great.
So I have a question where you were talking about the self-improvement, development, work earlier. And I think it's a pretty common thing where people they get involved with it, they drift away, they come back. What do you see as like the pitfall, or, is there a way to minimize that change in engagement?
So I've really come a long way since I got back involved with it, probably 20 years ago. And what I see as the big challenge with this sort of, I'll call it the self-help industry, is it's very much guru based. It's like, I have all the answers. I've been through all of this. You just need to come follow my system, come to my boot camps, keep coming to my seminars, and everything's going to be great for you. And to me, that takes away people's agency. And also, because I always look, and if you look at most of the people who are like leading these seminars, they never just followed one guy. They took a million different seminars by a million different people, and then took different pieces that worked for them and put it all together in something that really worked for them. So to me, this is the key word now, and that's empowerment. When I work with people, I want to empower them to make better choices, better decisions, to find their own path, and not have them rely on me. I'm nobody's guru. I don't want to be anyone's guru. I'm a facilitator. A facilitator supports somebody in the unfoldment of their own path. But to me, that's the real evolution now. And I think most people are kind of seeing the same thing. They just don't want to be told, like, this is what you have to do. They want to know, what do they have to do to feel better, do better, understand better, not from just one voice, but from a multitude of voices. And I think when we support people to help them to make their own decisions, they're more empowered and they make better decisions for themselves. It might not be the same decisions we would make for ourselves, but they shouldn't be. They don't have to be. They're a different, unique individual. We want them to make the decisions that's best for them.
Right. And I think it's also part of a struggle people have. I don't know if it's the state of our society right now, but especially when we talk about people that are in coaching roles or stuff like that, is it about the coach? Like, I've always kind of adopted, when I was consulting, and I did IT consulting for a while before I moved into communications and leadership coaching now, is I've always adopted the ghost approach. If you don't know I exist and you're successful, that's the win. It's the client, it's the person being the win. And maybe now with TikTok and everything else where it's me, maybe that's a factor of it.
Well, again, when it comes to like the social media platforms and things like TikTok and Instagram, those are not real reflections of society. And if you talk to people with boots on the grounds, like Michael, who's working with business owners and supporting them in creating a vision, they're not the ones on TikTok. They don't have the time to be on TikTok. Let's face it. They're approaching reality in a much different way than someone who's just trying to be a quote unquote influencer.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. However, our society seems to be literally focused on that. We used to be 15 minutes of fame. Now we're just talking maybe the 15 seconds or 25 seconds of fame. It is, I'll be honest with you, I find TikTok and that rapidity of, the rapidness really very destructive.
But you see, I would correct the language. I wouldn't say society, I would say media. Media is just one aspect of society, and media plays up because it's in their interest. It's because it's all about profit. but I don't think society is as focused. Now, certain parts of society, maybe.
Well, Sam, I'm going to disagree with you on that. Maybe we can parse those words a little bit more. When you say certain parts of society, yes, there really is a very significant fracture in our society in terms of youth. Maybe middle age, older people. You find so many young people being influenced by TikTok, by Instagram, and there's a real wedge, I think, between those young people who are basically being so influenced. This, I mean, when 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when we talked about people who influenced people, it wasn't TikTok folks who have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. But it's an interesting perspective, and probably another time for us to have that conversation. But you're right. Look, I understand what your goals are, and I really appreciate and respect the fact that your goal is to empower other people. Hopefully lots of young people are coming to you and working with you because they could use some of your empowerment capabilities. That's for sure. So I see our time is moving on.
Yeah, so we'll begin wrapping up here, in a couple of minutes. One question I did want to touch with you on, Sam, is, you mentioned the environment and, that aspect to wellness. One thing that there's been some research on, it's kind of been rekindled research recently, is the whole connectiveness or the conscious connectedness between people, environment, stuff like that. And one thing that always kind of triggers me to think about is the practice in Japan of forest bathing. People go out and go for that walk. I'm fortunate to me that I live in a pretty, rural area. I can go out and enjoy the forest and the trails and stuff like that. What's your interpretation or perspective on that kind of connectedness or role for people in wellness?
Well, to me, it's kind of obvious, the interconnectedness of everything. And I think today it's even more so than ever before that one thing affects everything else. This idea of like a fractal, right? A fractal is a mathematical equation that can get expressed different ways. And if you change one tiny little piece, it changes the whole image. And that's life. I mean, we don't know when we show up, if we, let's say, someone cuts us off in traffic and we honk at them and we yell at them, and then we're in a bad mood, and then that's going to affect other people in our lives. And who knows what the ripple effect of that's going to be, versus we're walking down the street and there's someone who's homeless and he's begging for some food or a cup of coffee, and we give him 50 cents or $1, or we buy him a cup of coffee. We have no idea how that's going to affect him. Like, I know a gentleman, a friend of mine, tells the story all the time that he saw someone begging for money, brought him into a McDonald's, bought him a cup of coffee, and he sat down and talked with him. And the guy said, I was really considering killing myself today. I felt like nobody in this planet cared about me. And if you hadn't done this, I seriously was going to kill myself. And now, because of that one simple act of sitting down and talking to him, buying him a cup of coffee, the man had hope. And, what happened to him afterwards, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But the possibilities are endless. And so when we show up in a better way, and we show up more compassionately, we show up with our hearts, we show up with an understanding that one person's health is everybody's health. I mean, to me, that was the big lesson of the pandemic. That, yes, we are our brother's keeper. That, yes, we do need to take care of everyone on the planet, because someone gets one of these weird, bizarre illnesses, it can affect the entire world. So, yeah, we do have a responsibility. And sometimes I feel, in the West, especially in the United States, we've gotten so individualistic, and you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you got to do everything on your own. And it's just like, no, that's not the way life works. We're a community, and we're a community of communities, and there are small and immediate communities, and then we're part of larger communities, which are part of larger communities. A friend of mine had this expression, and I still use it to today. There is no them. There is only us. Mm-hmm. And when we approach everything from that perspective, everything gets better.
Yeah, I think one of the things is when it comes to individualism, it's what's that role in driving the person what he or she wants to do. But at the same time, like you said, we live, with other people. So even if someone's a solopreneur, you have to have someone buy your stuff.
Right.
You have to interact with someone at some level. So I think it's like, when it's, the self-made person maybe is taken to an extreme literal interpretation.
Right.
Versus
Nobody is
yes,
self-made. Everyone has a team around them. And even if you're a solopreneur, you have service providers providing
right.
services to you that you would not be a successful solopreneur if it wasn't for your service.
Right. But maybe it's that drive like that,
Mhm.
because people have the different, like the entrepreneur versus the corporate, person, and neither's a wrong answer. It's what that person's, psyche, makeup, comfort level is.
Right.
I think that's probably where it comes into more of a play is how's that person motivated in that respect. But it's probably a topic we could like really dig into. We're about at 36 minutes right now. So do you have anything that you'd like to share? How people get a hold of you? Any closing comments? Anything like that, Sam?
Sure. Well, if anyone wants to reach out to me, my email address is real simple. It's sam@talkradio.nyc. And being the owner of the radio station, the one thing I just want to say to people is people need to hear your voice, your authentic voice, not the voice that people say you should have, not the voice you think you need to have to make more money, but your authentic, true voice. People are waiting to hear your voice. And inevitably, when we actually open our mouths, you'd be surprised at how the people who resonate with our message will come to us. But we're all sometimes a little afraid of like, oh no, I'm not a presenter, I'm not a speaker, I'm not a radio show host. You know what? If you have a passion, if you have an idea, if you just have something of value you want to share with the world, share it and you'll be surprised at the results.
Michael.
Well, I've been listening intently. I haven't spoken as much as I usually do. That's because I've really enjoyed hearing Sam speak and hearing your questions, Chad. I would say, I thought this was a fabulous 37 minutes that we've been on broadcasting. Learned a lot. I love some of the things that you said. I love your perspective on empowerment, about the interconnectedness of everything, how really speaking in your authentic, true voice. And particularly resonated with, best way to kind of live your life is recognize the reality and allow yourself to adapt. And that's when you have the chance to thrive. I like
come
that.
From your heart and come from your
heart. Chad, want to close up?
Yeah, sure. I am always enjoying conversations like this. This is why we do the show. We talk about business, we talk about communication, we look for the meaning, what's driving all of this. So thank you very much for joining us today, Sam. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you we do have a live audience. Thank you for joining us today. This will be available via replay, and we'll put links up for that as well, along with links to contact Sam. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the live stream. Thank you for joining us today. And if you have any comments or questions, please send them to Michael and I. We look forward to hearing from them. So thank you all very much.
And one last thing, if you can, and we're going to give you the last word too, Sam. We'll each get that last word. If you can, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Meaningful Communication Show. We're looking for subscribers. We have a number in mind. We hope that you're going to be one of them. Sam?
Well, I just wanted to thank you both, Chad, Michael, for having me on your show.